So I think, as I started mentioning earlier, there is a large portion of the developed world is aging and they're retiring, and a large number of entrepreneurs who had built businesses in the 60s, 70s, 80s are now getting to an age where they need to pass the baton on. And a lot of times they don't have a next generation. And as I mentioned, about 10,000 baby boomers retire every year, not every day. Not all of them have businesses, but those who do are also part of a generation where they built these businesses in second-tier cities, or they built them in traditional industries. And to pass the baton on, they have management, and these are small companies. Typically, I think there's about 23.5 million SMEs in Europe alone. And of these, they are about 15 times as many small and medium businesses are available for transaction today as businesses over 100 million euros. So there's a huge supply of these companies. On the other side, there is a lot of capital that's chasing deals, but most of the private equity funds that are investing money in traditional businesses like deals that are over 50 to 100 million euros because of the nature of the industry and the nature of fees and the nature of carry and economies of scale. Whereas on the lower side of the segment, which is the venture capital side, most VCs need to have a portfolio diversified approach, and they need to invest in companies that are going to follow what they call a hockey stick curve, where you invest money up front and then these things will follow. They have to give them a 10x, 20x return over 4 to 5 years. Whereas these traditional businesses that were started by this baby boomer generation are typically in areas where they do, let's say, up to 10 to 50 million euros of revenues. They do about 20% of EBITDA, 10 to 20% of EBITDA. And these are businesses that are usually in second-tier cities where it's not easy to get high-quality talent. Although having said that, with the scenario we are in today, we believe there's going to be a strong interest from highly skilled, very entrepreneurial individuals in their, we would say, in their 30s and 40s, who are at a point where they're willing to live in smaller cities and have a higher quality of life, and not live in the dense cities that we have the interest that's been there before in the millennial and Gen X and perhaps in the Gen Z generation going forward. So the opportunity really exists because of a few things that have come together. One, we have people retiring who own businesses. Second, you've got technologies that have transformed some of these industries. So digital marketing, online sales, CRM systems, very basic things. We're not talking about AI, ML, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a company we looked at in Switzerland that was founded in 1939. They make fragrances and flavors. The company does 10 million to 12 million euros of revenues. They do about 20 to 30% EBITDA. They have 10 employees and they have zero debt. But their website was built, I believe, in 2004. They don't have a foreign presence. And for them, going international means going from German-speaking Switzerland to Germany. So these are businesses that haven't lived up to their potential because the founding families were happy with what they have, and we respect that. But there is a time to maintain the legacy, but bring in entrepreneurs who will take the legacy forward by changing the traditions. So the thought process here is that there are these businesses available. Transformations are happening because of the retirement of the old guard, new technologies coming in, access to cheap capital. I mean, this is the first time that we've seen in a long, long time where access to capital, both as loans from banks, as equity, but also from grants from governments, is probably the most convenient that we've ever seen it. And this is partially also because governments are realizing that you need to support local companies and keep jobs local. So there is an opportunity for people to buy into entrepreneurship, if you will. And that's where we see the real opportunity coming in. Now, the other aspect that's really interesting here is that sustainability is a key measure of the success of a business, especially in developed countries. And our focus tends to be developed countries, especially because interest rates are lower and because the developed countries have a demographic shift, whereas in developing countries, typically there's enough in terms of nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters and so on to take over the business. But in developed countries, because of the way the population growth has gone, there is a break in succession. The other aspect that we like about this industry, entrepreneurship through acquisition, is the fact that the multiples on these companies are lower. So if you go to a company below 50 million euros of revenues, the multiples are typically anything between 4 to 6 to 7 times EBITDA. Whereas with larger companies, what we're seeing is transactions happen between 9.5 to 16 times EBITDA. But let's very quickly talk about how an entrepreneurship through acquisition would work. So I'll give you a metaphor. Let's say you're working at a P&G or at a Unilever or at a Mercedes or whatever, and you've been in the business 5, 6, 7 years. You have an MBA, you don't have an MBA, you're getting to be in your early 30s, mid 30s, early 40s, and you say, look, I don't really want to go and start a business and spend the next 5 years working 24 hours a day and trying to raise money for most of the time rather than actually building my business. At the same time, I don't want to go join a Google or an Amazon or an Uber. And nothing wrong with those businesses, but you're at a point where you say, look, I now have the management skills. I understand the market. I have a little bit of a network. I've got skills clearly, and I have capital, but I don't have all the capital to be able to go buy a business. So that's the point at which you say, okay, but I want to buy a business because I can see these opportunities. How do I buy a business? So there's a couple of models that come into play here. And you'll hear about some of the models from the next speakers. So the first model is a self-funded search, right? So this could happen because you've saved up enough money and say, okay, I have $100,000 or $150,000, and I think I can survive on this for the next 2 years until I find a business to buy. So that's a self-funded search. The other aspect of this could be that you say, look, I have a full-time job, but I'm willing to spend weekends and I'm willing to spend my evenings on finding a business to buy. And once I find it, I'll give up my job and I'll find the money to fund this and grow it. Now, it'll be much slower because your energy is split. But this is a model in which you can do the search without taking on external responsibilities. The second model is a funded search, where you would go out and you would find either one of two, a single sponsor or multiple sponsors. So let's say Oscar and I were to put together a search fund. We would have, let's say, 10 or 20 units that we would offer to investors to fund our search. So this is called a search fund, but we would have 10 to 20 units, which we would offer to searchers, to investors who are typically ex-entrepreneurs, they're ex-searchers, or these are families that have sold their own businesses and fundamentally believe that there is an opportunity to build, to add to the world by transforming other businesses. So you would go to them and they would each give you, let's say, 25 to 30,000 euros for one unit. And you would be able to raise effectively 300 to 500,000 euros, which should pay for a few things, which I leave to my colleagues to go into. But essentially a few resources, some software, some technology, and a basic salary for you to survive on while you find a business to buy. What do they get for the money they give you? They get the option without the obligation to invest in the company that you find. And the structures in that, we don't have too much time to go into today, but we can certainly address slightly, are you would use bank loans, you would use grants, and you would use equity from your investors, but you would also take some seller financing from the person who's selling you the business. And this is strategic as well, because the person who's selling you the business, you need them to stay in the business, at least for a little while, because a lot of these businesses are really driven by personal relationships and by the founding families that built them. And this is the first time they're ever selling a business. So they might not know everything they need to transfer to you. So through this transition period where they have some interest in the business, they're able to give you that transition and you're able to sort of then effectively take control of the business. So that's how a funded search works. There is now a new model for searches, which in fact, we will be announcing something on Search Velocity, which is our internal platform in the next couple of months. But the idea is that you would be able to go to a accelerator or an incubator style platform, get access to the tools and the resources across a couple of searchers, and be able to effectively shorten the time to find a company that you would usually need. And you'd be able to reduce the costs by that you would need to spend on building a platform, bespoke platform, because there will be some economies of scale that are shared among searchers. The other aspect that's beneficial here is that you then get the opportunity to, within the next 6 months, decide if this is even the path for you. Because typically, if you raise money from external investors and you started the search, it is highly embarrassing and difficult to then go back and say, look, I'm not really going to do this anymore because I'm not seeing the kind of traction I want, or things have changed. So this will be a platform that can help you then achieve test the model out and see if it works for you, which really works well for folks who've been in who have other jobs.